Hello, everybody. Hi, welcome to I Would Agree. Let me get this right. Is it really only the second episode of the year? It feels like January's been an absolute bombshell for everyone that I've spoken to. Been such a busy month already. So, hi everyone. If you're watching live, brilliant. Looking forward to hearing your questions as we go along. If you're watching us back, thanks for taking the time out your day. Appreciate you couldn't make it live, but hi anyway. Feel free to drop comments on the actual event if you aren't watching it live, and we'll do our best to kind of get back to any questions that are raised. Today's session is customer experience with Mike Verret. For those of you that haven't had the pleasure of meeting Mike, he was the face of Hasbro Games for many years and has many interesting stories to tell about the time that he was there. Hi, Mike. Hi. You're on mute there, Mike. You're on mute. Not the first time. Not the first time.
Let me start again. Hey, it's my brother from another mother. How are you, Paul?
Hi, Mike. Great to have you on. Thanks for joining us. You all right?
Oh, thanks for having me. This is fantastic.
So yeah, I introduced you as the face of Hasbro Games, but obviously you've done many other things than that. You've done lots of crazy experiences that have got you to be where you are now, and we kind of met through mutual networking events and people that have introduced us. Shout out to Simon Town.
Hi. Mr. Town, yes.
The man of many talents. But yeah, we kind of met, I don't know, it must have been about 6 to 9 months ago now, Mike.
Sounds about right.
And since then, I've been blown away by the level of input that Mike's had on the relationship, the mutual relationship that we've got, the output that Mike has to many of his connections and network. And I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but what Mike in essential terms does is to help other people to understand how to talk to their customers, how to get their audience's attention, and how to translate it in a way that makes sense to their audience, to bring them in and get them close to the fireside so that you can tell your story. Mike, I'll let you do the intro yourself. It's I don't do you justice, but here you go.
I hope I can back up everything you just said. I am coming to you from the giant state of Rhode Island in the United States, about an hour south of Boston and 3 hours north of New York. And I sit in my office showing businesses how to talk about themselves to their audience in a way that gets their audience engaged, like you said. And it's based on a simple insight that no matter what business you're in show business. There's no business without show business. There's a costume, there's a set, there's props, there's directors, there's a script, and everything is crafted as the business sees it, 100% internal and important to the business. The challenge arises when you realize your audience is only interested in about 5% of that. And you know 100, everything's important to you. You've built your stage and your show. But translating that out to the outside world becomes a challenge because for you to find that 5% is really difficult. So put it in the context of an author writing a book. Stephen King, famous author, his movies are translated into movies. Books are translated into movies. And he writes a new horror novel that's 400 pages long. Now it comes time to sell that horror novel. The way that people are engaging with the content is not reading the book or the first sentence, it's reading the blurb or inside flap back cover. It's 3 paragraphs that distill 400 pages of information into a sales message or a connection point with the audience to get them to buy it and read it. If you're Stephen King and you have 400 pages of creativity and character background and sets and environments in your mind, how can you possibly extract what those 3 paragraphs need to be to make that connection? And it's based on the fact that everything is important to that author. Every detail is in their mind and they're thinking about it all. Their audience is only interested in 5% at that point of connection, and how you bring them through that information in order that they stay on pace with is imperative in getting your message across. So what happens is businesses create their internal narrative, right? They use words like synergize and ideate and, all of these KPIs is my favorite, key performance indicators. Now, think about that in the world outside of business. You don't use those terms. That's not how you talk or think as a human being. If you and I go out and get a drink after work one night, we go to the pub and I'm like, oh, I got to get home. It's time to go. Hey, Paul, what are your KPIs this weekend? You'd look at me like I had three heads. I'd say, what are you doing this weekend? I'd say, what are your plans this weekend? Not what are your KPIs? That is how businesses think, and it skews their ability to talk to an audience the right way. What they need is a perspective of, they ask themselves the question, what problem do I solve for my customer, right? But they're not thinking about the perception of that solution. They're not thinking about how to relate that solution. All they're thinking about is how I build my business strategy and what I offer around that idea. And at no point are they thinking about the perception that the outside world has of that. Does it make sense to them? Are you explaining it to them the right way? You could have the best solution in the world for their problem, but if you can't explain it to them and get them connected to it and why it's important to them, then it doesn't matter. So what I do is provide the audience's perspective of what businesses are saying, what their one way to talk about themselves is, what is their first handshake, if you will. Let's use their website as an example and show them what it looks like, show them how to clarify that and put it in a connection point to get them looking at you as different from everyone else. You got to be first, best, or different in their eyes. So at that point where they're scrolling through Google and looking at results, they're looking at 25, 50 results, and all they have to do is move the mouse back and forth to the back button to look at the next one. They're effectively operating on, nah, that doesn't resonate. That doesn't resonate. Oh, wait. And it's almost like going through social media. You scroll. Oh, that's interesting. And your thumb stops. That's that connection point I'm talking about. But once you get their attention, if the next thing you try to sell them is, here's all of our services, they're still not relating to that yet. It's important to you. You think that's what you should be driving, but you haven't related those services to them in a way that substantiates that connection point and brings them through in the right order. So what I do is effectively, if you take the idea of, say, a brand blueprint or a brand ladder or a brand strategy, it starts with somebody has a vision. They create a mission statement. That mission is given a brand essence. What do we stand for, let's say? And it starts to create almost an archetype or a persona. And then the next level down is, what are our core values? And the next level down is, what is our strategy to go to market? And the next level down is our products and services. That creates a vacuum, an internal conversation that's business driven. And at no point is that relatable to the audience yet. What they need is a translation of how to connect that to the audience the right way. So, excuse me, I'm going to give you an example of how this works. I think of everything as a conversation with someone. If they're going to ask questions to elicit information, what's the order they're going to ask those questions in? If I meet somebody, I use the elevator pitch as a perfect example of this, simply because you're on an elevator and it's this opportunity to talk about what you do, right? That's the concept of the business analogy of, what's your elevator pitch? It's designed to be, if somebody asks you what you do on an elevator, the doors close. So what do you do? How do you answer that? And we're programmed to think in 10 to 15 seconds, say what I do. And we may use words like, if I'm in public relations, I say, I own a PR firm. To the other person, no matter what I say next, all they're going to remember is Mike PR firm. They shed the rest of the stuff to make room for it, okay? The other side of that is, I tell them everything I do. And a lot of those statements start with, I help. And it's, I help businesses doing this, achieve this by providing this to show them this result. And I don't know what to remember at that point. But if I think about the elevator as an opportunity, a captive audience for a number of floors, I don't know where they're getting off or on. It's not a timed thing. It's, how do I keep that conversation going? It's predicated on giving them an answer that leads to the next question of what you want them to ask. So this is going to sound one-sided, Paul, but here's how a conversation could go on an elevator. If you and I are on there and I asked you what you do, I would say, so what do you do? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. So how do you help them? What does that look like? How does it work? What services do you provide? What do they get out of it? How are they better off? Do you have proof to back it up? Yeah, I'll take your card. That sounds like a conversation with a human being, and it's based on what they need to know in the order they need to know to get there. Go back to that. What do you do? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. You tell me all your services, I've lost interest. But if you connect me on the second floor, first floor is get me to say, tell me more. And it's about connection. A PR firm wouldn't say, I run a PR firm. They'd say, I make news when it matters most. I don't know if you're a reporter or if you're an unruly celebrity on the gossip column yet, but I'm intrigued and I want to know more. Then you're leading me to your audience and what they're going through on the second floor. Businesses can't write their own news. They're too close to it. They need that outside perspective. So how do you help them? I get them out of writer's block. I find those words they can't. Fourth floor, how do you do it? That becomes a process. 3 steps that shows you the beginning to end relationship and what happens. Fifth floor, your services now can hang off of that process. Here's what you'll experience at each step instead of just here's everything that I do. And then showing them what's good, what's better off for them based on their challenge on the second floor is your 6th floor. Your 7th floor is about social proof, testimonials, empirical proof, case studies that it works, your story, experiential proof, what expertise and what you've learned that makes you qualified to do this, validates all of everything else that you just said to them. And then finally, that call to action could be a call to conversation. In my case, it's schedule a free 30-minute call. But I'm bringing them to that story on their terms. And I compare it to a frequently asked questions page on a website.
Yeah.
You're not going to put it in alphabetical order. You're going to put it in the order that people would ask the questions. And they don't ask the most detailed question first. They ask the most general question first.
Yeah.
Goes general to specific. That's how to think about that message and that one way to talk about yourself. So that's how my mind works. And it's based on my 3 inputs for it are human nature, logic, and common sense. Because those seem to be things that fly out the window when we have to think about our business. We think internally in those 3 things that our audience relies on as our translation don't exist anymore. So that's where I fit in. Long-winded way of explaining it, but that's what I do.
Beautifully put, Mike. It's like you've said that before.
Twice.
And I think, so what I always try and do for my audience when we're recording these sessions is to translate what works really well for one industry and show how that can iterate out into other industries and other verticals. So when you talk about what you're doing, it's very easy to see from one perspective how this works for small, medium enterprise or even larger enterprise businesses. How do you help them talk to their audience? How do you help them talk to their customers? How do you help them get that writer's block off? But for a lot of my customers, a lot of my viewers that watch this show that are in my connections list, we're coming from the customer experience, from the contact center world, from the call center world, from lots of different industries, so everything from insurance to banking to retail, utilities, telco, and onwards. And when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, it kind of hit me quite profoundly that internally we've been talking about the price walking regulations for the FCA at the moment. So if you're not aware, Mike, it's a UK thing. So basically, our financial regulator has turned around and said that insurance businesses can no longer heavily discount first-year insurance premiums to attract new customers.
Yeah, how helpful for the insurance business, I'm sure.
Well, how it plays out is yet to be seen. But one thing that's clear is that businesses in that industry that now want to attract customers to them can no longer rely on that first-year discount being what draws their customers in.
It's no longer an act now and receive a discount kind of offer that they can do.
Exactly that. Gotcha. Exactly that. So the focus for them now has to be twofold on how they differentiate themselves from what is already a crowded market, but also how they retain those customers that they already have and improve on their customer loyalty. And your tagline, which I'm not going to spoil for everyone, you're being first,
best or different.
Yeah. Right. So what Mike excels is helping people who are already it doesn't matter what your business is, you are different from everybody else in some way, shape or form. You just need to distill that down. And what hit me was when me and Mike were talking about his tagline was that actually that's really apt for where our insurance industry is at this moment in time. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Mike, and
Hit me.
I'd like to hear what your thoughts are as to how an insurance firm can go through that thought process. They've now had their main stream of how to attract customers removed from them. What should be their next steps in terms of considering how to attract their customers? How do they show how they are different from their competitors, especially for those of us who are watching who are perhaps from a sales background within that industry? You know, you're on the phones every day talking to customers, either inbound or outbound, trying to kind of bring that business in. How should they be talking about their business that shows how they're different to their competitors?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing, just to sort of align on, is the idea of need state. And everybody has heard the term, what is my customer's need state? Meaning, what problem are they having that I'm going to solve? Okay.
Mhm.
And what happens there is it starts to define, okay, this is my point of contact and how they're thinking, and now I'm going to solve the problem for them. So to put this to a test of need state and how companies interpret it, I'm going to go back to the example of a PR firm just because I always do for some reason. But if I'm searching for a PR firm and I put it into Google and I get all these results, my need state from the company's perspective is they need a PR firm because they have news, press releases, whatever. Okay. So in that sense, if the first three results I click on, they're all going to say we're a PR firm first, right? That is based on the fact that here's their need state we're going to solve going forward. Now, let's look at the fourth result and how this shifts when you start to look at how their motivation to the need state and how they got to where they are. What is their motivation for searching for a PR firm in Google is more important than, yep, you're in the right place, we're a PR firm. And if that fourth one says, you get writer's block, we'll find the words to get your news out when it matters most. Now they look different than the other three. And they're talking about my impetus for typing PR firm into Google in the first place. I can't write my own news. So now what that creates is, oh, okay, these people are aligning to actually what I'm going through. And I saw a great example of this in my days at Hasbro, where an agency came in, and we were so used to seeing agencies come in and say, we're an ad agency. Here's where our offices are. Here's where our teams are. And whatever the baseline capabilities deck would be, that's what they would come in with. But I had sent them a challenge and invited them in. I didn't pick their name off of a Google list or a phone book. I had done some research, and effectively everything they just shared with me is available on their website. So they just spent 30 minutes telling me what I already know. But imagine this one coming in saying, your challenge you gave us was increase your presence on social media. The way we see your challenge, and he takes out his phone and starts scrolling like this with his thumb. How many people know what this is? All of us aligned with scrolling through Instagram or whatever platform. And when he said, look at when I stop my thumb, what does that remind you of? Content I'm interested in. He said, your challenge isn't increasing your presence. Your challenge is stopping the scroll. And what he instantly did was relate it to everybody in the room because we had all experienced it. And it defined our challenge outside of business terms and in actual experience terms. So it became much more familiar to us. That's what different can look like. That PR firm that says, we understand your problem, read on to find out how we'll solve it, is far more effective at that point. So now let's look at the insurance business. It is a necessary evil. Nobody is interested in this. Nobody wants to have life insurance or home insurance because that speaks to something I have to spend on to make sure that when something goes wrong, I can handle it. Who thinks that way? Nobody, right? So let's take the US insurance business, auto insurance in particular, okay? I'm using this as an example with a point. Every agency had their own personality, like we're the good hands people, we'll take care of you, or we're solid like a rock, or Liberty Mutual is this giant insurer that offers auto insurance, and they were bankers collars, starch collars, Windsor knots, as buttoned up old school as you can be. Along comes Geico, so easy a caveman can do it. And they use the gesture, like humor, as their way to talk about a highly commoditized thing that everybody needs if they want to drive a car. They don't have a choice. Fast forward 20 years, there's not one auto insurance provider in this market that doesn't use humor as the device, because they saw it worked for Geico, and Geico stood out as different in that moment. So that need state, let's take the financial market or insurance market and look at that. Their challenge is always going to be pushing water uphill, because it's things that people don't want to think about. Retirement, after I pass, my car, my home, what if it catches on fire? None of that is stuff they want to think about. So to me, in that market, the one that's going to stand out is the one that says, we know you don't want to think about this. We know you don't want to deal with this stuff, but we also know you have to. And our goal is to make that as easy for you as possible.
Yeah.
Now you're talking to your customer about how they need insurance, but why? What's motivating them? I don't want to pay for insurance every month, but I have to.
Yeah.
You're aligned with the customer and speak in their language. Look, if you're a plumber, if something goes wrong in your house, I need a plumber. And the first three say we're a plumber, but the fourth one says, when something goes wrong, you need it fixed in 5 minutes. We'll be there in 4. Which one are you going to click on?
Yeah. And to your point, be first, best, or different.
Different is in the eyes of the audience. It doesn't mean we have to dress as clowns on the street corner and hold a sign for our business.
Yeah.
It means how they perceive us as different. And that's the goal. It's a simple way to look at it, but it's about that. If you connect with them in a way that intrigues them, and then bring them through your message, that one way you talk about yourself in the right order and how they need to ask the questions to elicit that information, you're winning. You're doing much better than the other guy who's saying, I have a service you need, or here's my hourly rate, or I'm a PR firm.
And I intentionally titled this episode Customer Experience. And there's a lot of people out there going, but Paul, this isn't customer experience. This isn't customer experience. My point is that unless you know what your customer experience is, then you can't verbalize what it is that you do for your customers and how you do that.
Exactly.
So, Mike, you've got to talk about what the outcome is going to be, what they're going to get, and why you're different in that space. Where you need to go with it next is to talk about that customer experience. They're not interested in what the service is, really. They know what the service is. Everybody's roughly the same.
Mm-hmm.
You hook them in with one part. Here's how we're different. Here's the customer experience that you can expect to receive as being part of us. And that the two of those really differentiate the business from the rest of the marketplace. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a very well-known example of what you're talking about in practice. McDonald's. Mm-hmm. McDonald's, their 4 core values are all customer-centric, customer-focused, whatever the buzzword is. Their 4 values are clean, friendly, fast, quality. Mm-hmm. They can't put that in an ad campaign, but they need to relate the importance of that and what they do for the customer in a way that the customer relates to. They don't say, you're going to like us because we're all these things. They say, we love to see you smile. And here's what we do to make sure you're smiling. We're fast, we're quality, we're clean, we're friendly. All those things elicit a smile on your face. That's what they're communicating out. And that's what that translation looks like.
Yeah. So that's how we'd relate customer experience, being different, and your experience from Hasbro into what is essentially a well done, an industry that's been around for a lot of years. It's people struggle to differentiate, and yet every day we see examples of people differentiating themselves in that marketplace really well. But even for the established players in that marketplace, you don't need to do anything drastically different from what you're doing. But there are ways of reaching out to those customers in a way that speaks to them and connects you with them. Beautifully put, Mike. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Paul, I enjoy every one we have. I think the simple way to look at it is if you think about that order of information and you go to your own, anybody goes to their own website, I'm willing to bet all the information is on your website. It's just in the wrong order. And if you start to think about that order of information, it starts to create a far more powerful message, one way to talk about yourself. That creates consistency. That creates efficiency. If you know what to say and who to say it to and where they are, you go to those places. It makes everything flow more easily. But most importantly, it gets you out of that fog of what the hell am I doing? And I have all of these to-dos, and every day feels like a 24-hour cycle. I had somebody tell me today, you're the CEO, the chief everything officer. Yep. Getting clarity on this helps to get clarity on everything else because that fog is lifted. The biggest challenge isn't what we do. The biggest challenge is selling what we do and getting people to believe in it. And it's always on their terms.
Exactly that. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And for everybody who's heard me talking, or one of the questions I get when I'm talking with people is, so why did you want to talk, Paul? Because I do a lot of networking, right? I do a lot of talking, do a lot of networking.
I would like to say you're very good at
it. Well, like, people always wonder what my sales pitch is, right? And not about the sales pitch. I don't really, like, I don't go into the networking conversations to deliver a sales pitch. If people want to know what I do, I'll happily tell them about it, and I'll drone on for 20 minutes about what we do. But ultimately, I'm very fortunate in that what I do is a very high need product and solution. People know about it already before they get to me, and generally are already hunting for it. But the beauty of having people like yourself in my network is, when I talk to people, and you're one of the people that I mention almost every single conversation that I have, because I have a big breadth in my network, right? And you're one of the extreme ends of my network.
Is it you gotta meet this guy just to hear how much he talks?
No, because they're already talking to me.
Because I'd get that.
No, but like, you're very different to the rest of the network that I have in a lot of different ways, and you're very very out there. And I love your brand. I love what you do, and I love the conversations that we have. But then I can start delving into things like, you've got I've got one guy. He parties with rappers. He knows the voice of Optimus Prime. He named a dinosaur from Jurassic World when the company that asked him for it tried to name it after the outgoing leader of the Church of Satan.
Hey, I think I know this guy you're talking about.
That guy is you. And then I've got other extremes in my network that I go to. You get mentioned on every single conversation I have with people, and I think that that speaks volumes to your character, because if anybody who's out there hasn't met you, then you really should meet Mike. At least have a conversation with them in the comments. And if you're from the insurance industry and you want to hear a bit more about what my thoughts are on it, or what Mike's thoughts are on it, feel free to reach out. We'll be both happy to chat with anybody out there who's watching this back. But I hope more than anything else, and in line with my networking conversation, everybody who's watching this got something from it. And that's what we try and promote with AI, would agree, is that there's a lot of cross-industry learning. It's something I picked up very early on in my retail transition, was that everything that I'd learned in retail was directly applicable to the contact center and customer service world. And likewise, there's a lot of things that are done in the contact center and customer service world that the retail world benefits from, or could benefit from, if the industries didn't, perhaps silo themselves quite as much. So I'm trying to break down some of those barriers. And Mike, it's been great to have you on board to kind of help with that process. And I think you've really brought that to life for a lot of people, hopefully.
Paul, thanks for having me. And you talk about networking, and I'm not kidding about your prowess in it. Your philosophy and why I love talking with you all the time is I had somebody mention this once, like the idea of his referral network is come for the referrals, stay for the relationships. And it's about that ongoing conversation and dialogue, and the fact that we're able to talk at least once a month and catch up, even if it's not work, solidifies that relationship. And that's what I think you do best. So keep it up, damn it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you coming on the show. And
thank you very much.
And we'll hear the other stories.
Anybody who wants to talk to me and Paul, you can definitely find us on LinkedIn. Please connect. I'd love to meet you. And all I sell is free 30-minute phone calls. So feel free to sign up. It won't cost you a thing.
Brilliant. Bring your own coffee.
Exactly.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Have a great
Paul.
afternoon.
Have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Bye-bye.